So we'll start by setting a motivation. I was thinking, we're listening to the Mahayana Dharma, Mahayana Lojong in particular. So our motivation for studying, discussing Dharma, and practicing needs to be in accordance with this. So we're not going to attend this just for our own benefits, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. And with that, we'll cite some brief prayers. So visualizing in the space in front is Shakyamuni Buddha, surrounded by root and lineage gurus, above him, and the Dharma texts around, the Yidams and so on below, or the Pandits of Nalanda, or any figures you can find inspiring and visualize. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, out, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha over the world, supreme guide of beings who subdue, teach gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, art, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha over the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, art, perfect and complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha over the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, and prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. And we'll recite the brief praise from the Heart Sutra and the mantra 3 times. So, the inexpressible, inconceivable, and indescribable perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to mother the victorious ones of 3 times I prostrate. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Bodhisattva. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Bodhisattva. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Bodhisattva. And finally, we'll do a short mandala offering. Sa shi bo hi yu ji me to dra vi la ling ji ni re yen ba di Sangye Shindu Mikte Ruwai Dokuna Dashina Chopasho Idangu Vetnamandala Kanyatayami. And then finally, refuge. Sangye Chodam Soni Chodam La Janju Padu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sonagi Dwola Penshir Sangye Drupa Shu Sangye Chodam Soni Chodam La Janju Padu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sonagi Dwola Penshir Sangye Drupa Shu Sangye Chodam Soni Chodam La Janju Badu Dani Kyamsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sonangi Dwola Penshir Sangye Rupa Sho. And so we'll start with the text, continuing from where we were last time. So last time we finished verse 14, so we covered half the text. So we shall cover the last 14 verses now. We'll start with verse 15. And when a feeling of discouragement arises, let me praise the glories of the Buddha and meditate on the voidness of both states. So, sort of starting off with a feeling of discouragement, from where we feel our practice isn't going anywhere, or no matter how much we try, things aren't going right, or maybe not helping beings as much as we want to. it can be really easy to be discouraged in our practice. And all my gurus kind of suggested reading biographies of masters of the past. One of my main teachers who taught me this text, Geshe Namdak, was saying when he had difficult periods in the Geshe program, he would read the biographies of practitioners and scholars, especially like the likes of Shakbar Lama and Milarepa. And these were very inspiring and relaxed the mind a bit when it's very difficult. So when saying let me praise the glories of the mind, this is talking about the Buddha nature, these potential we all have to be enlightened. And this kind of then means no matter what we do for practicing the Dharma, we are progressing. It's not a waste of time or anything to be discouraged about. And then finally, this meditate on the avoidance of both states isn't just about the kind of normal emptiness of self and phenomena, but it's talking about this state of discouragement and the state of Buddha nature, the Tathagatagarbha, and how both are empty of inherent existence. So, you think that the discouragement arises from something, usually a kind of misconceived expectation of if I do this retreat, I'll have this realization. If it doesn't happen, we feel disappointed. But you can kind of see that there's an dependent arising really obvious. And then the Tathagatagarbha is a bit more complex to understand the Buddha nature of, but it's the kind of the Tathagatagarbha depends on the school you follow. There's a bit of disagreement between Nyingma and Gelug and Kagyu understandings of the difference between Tathagatagarbha and Dharmakaya. So we won't go into that now because it's a huge topic to discuss, but we're kind of talking about here the mind being empty of inherent existence because it's arriving thing from previous causes and conditions. So we can use any understanding of emptiness there. And then verse 16, whenever an object of attachment or hostility arises in any situation, let me regard it like an illusion or a projection. Whenever I hear unpleasant words, let me regard them like an echo. And whenever harm happens to my body, let me regard it as coming from my previous karma. So this verse really summarizes a lot of Lojong training. So we're starting off with seeing objects of attachment and hostility as an illusion. So we're seeing the aspect of existing inherently as an illusion. And when we see if there's an object, a person we're really attached to, if we think they're inherently like this, they cannot change, that's where the afflictions arise from. When they change, we suffer because of that expectation. But if we already see that they are not like this, if there is no inherent part of them that is what we find worthy of attachment or aversion, the afflictions lose their power because when it changes, we just go, oh yeah, well, this is going to happen. It's nature of cause and effect, couldn't be avoided. And we can really, developing an understanding of emptiness reduces the ability of afflictions to impact our mind. So this is the real Mahayana mind training. If you have an understanding of emptiness, your mind cannot be bothered by anything. Lama Zopa Rinpoche would be offered thousands of dollars by one person and be like, oh yes, thank you, yes. And then in the next moment, something would go disastrously wrong and they'd lose thousands of dollars on another project. And he'd go, oh yes, oh well, it's okay. Cause and effect. And that would be it. He would display an aspect of being pleased to the donor, but from people that have spent time with him personally, they've told me that his internal aspect wasn't any different. As much as he showed someone that was a donor, you need to thank them so they don't feel discouraged. But internally, he didn't see any difference between gain and loss. And then when we regard unpleasant words as an echo, we're saying, it's not the words that harm us, it's how we react to them. And if we see how this is empty inherent existence, if there's nothing inherent to the words that causes harm, you can kind of reduce the power. It's the same sort of thing as, attachment and aversion. If someone you have strong attachment to criticizes you, you feel a lot of pain because you weren't expecting it. But if you see there's no inherent existence to that, well, you're not as bothered. You knew this could happen. There's nothing fixed, that they'd only praise you. And then whatever harm happens to my body. So we can't physically stop someone harming us. That's the result of our karma. If you have the karma to be caught in a certain situation, or whatever happens, you can't avoid that, but you can change how you approach it. The mind that happens can be altered. You can see in beings, with great realizations, they can be injured, but not. The Buddha, had backache, but he didn't suffer because of it. So that's the kind of talking here. We undergo suffering, or undergo pain, but we don't have to experience suffering. Then verse 17, let me step up to living in a sequestered place outside the limits of any town, and like a corpse of a dead game animal, hide myself in solitude and live without attachments. So once again, Atisha's praising going into an isolated place to do retreat. And we're saying corpse of a dead game animal. No one really cares about the corpse of an animal, especially, if a deer dies and someone finds it and it's been there a few days, they won't take the meat off it. It's too far gone. But they won't care either. It's not like it was a sheep that's lost the money or anything. It's just, oh yeah, the deer's died, and move on. So we want to be like that. We don't want to be concerned about what people think about us. We don't want people who distract our mind and cause any of the afflictions to spike to be influencing retreat. And then verse 18, there let me always be stable with my Buddha figure, and whenever a feeling of laziness or the draw of entertainment arises, let me enumerate my own shortcomings and remind myself of the essential points of taming behavior. So here, when it says Buddha figure, the Tibetan text actually uses the word yidam. So yidam, as well as being the meditation of deity, literally means to bind our mind. So what Atisha's saying here is to, be stable with our yidam in one sense, to be stable in our tantric practice, but also remember to bind our mind to the Buddha Dharma. When we feel lazy and don't want to practice, remember the benefits of the Buddha and his great qualities. And the same can be done for all of our yidams. If, we think of the good qualities of Guru Rinpoche or Chenrezig or, Vajrakalaya, any kind of yidam connect, Vajrayogini or so on. And then verse 19, but if I happen to see others, let me speak calmly, gently and sincerely, rid myself of any frowns or closed-off expressions, and always keep a smile. So, generally as bodhisattvas, you want to try and help others and be kind, not necessarily pushed over. And, people do whatever they want, but you've got to show some kindness still. You can be firm but kind. You can say to someone, no, that's not right. You shouldn't be doing that. But you can be doing it from a place of kindness so they don't suffer anymore, or, there's no kind of pain there. And then the thing about keeping a smile, if you ever see a statue of a peaceful bodhisattva, they always have a slight smile on their face. And his owners talks about this a lot, about if you have a smile, you look more open and people are generally happier and you can make a better connection to people. And you okay, look.
Yeah. So about kindness, Lamala has said before, I think that kindness doesn't always look kind. And I think that applies to when we have to be firm. Is that how you view it?
Yeah, I think that's right. My teacher raised an orphan in the monastery. And he said, he's always kind to the orphan. Doesn't mean he never told him off. And took his phone off him or said he couldn't go out and play with his friends.
Yes.
It maybe doesn't look kind, but in the long run, it helped. And it was from a place of kindness. So I think it's the same. We do things that are kindness, but people don't always see it like that.
I think so. And I have a friend who when his daughter was very young, she almost ran out into traffic, and he had to like snatch her, like, really forcefully to stop her from getting hit by a car. So I think it's like that too.
Yeah, I think so. His Holiness always uses that as a good example for wrathful deities.
Mm.
It's like a parent whose child's run out in front of the car. They're going
Yes.
to grab them and kind of shake them a bit and
Yes.
look quite angry. There's just pure compassion. It's not out of anger. It's out of concern.
Yes.
I think that goes with smiling as well. A genuine smile is a lot better than a fake smile. But yeah, we want to help people connect to the Dharma. And if people go, "Oh, you're a Buddhist, but you're always miserable," then it doesn't help them connect. Whereas if people go, "You're a Buddhist and you're always happy," well, I want to be happy. Maybe that's where I need to look. So it's an easy way to help people meet the Dharma, I think. So verse 20, and when I'm continually seeing others, let me not be miserly, but take joy in giving and rid myself of all envy. Yes, so the perfection of generosity really is the opposite of miserliness. And it helps get rid of envy, If you're not as concerned about what other people have, you don't get this kind of feeling of envy about what they have a better house, a better car, more money than me. If you're not quite attached to possessions, you don't feel like that. And obviously, Atisha's talking to a range of people. He talked to lay people and monks. So, giving doesn't need to be material. Giving of Dharma and giving of protection are also important aspects of giving we should do. And, generosity brings peace to our mind, whereas jealousy causes suffering. I think that's the main takeaway point. In verse 21, in order to safeguard the mind of others, let me rid myself of all contention and always have patient tolerance. So we're saying here about to do with safeguard the mind of others, about what people think about us. And, if we're outwardly always angry, people don't have a very good opinion of us. Whereas if you're patient, people tend to have a better opinion. But also, we're not, it's about attachment to the eight worldly concerns of praise and criticism. People praise us and we like it, and we don't like it when they criticize us. But it's not beneficial. We kind of need to be rid of this anger and wish for people to be praising us and making ourselves in awkward mental states to get praise. In verse 22, let me not be fawning nor fickle in friendship, but rather always stay faithful. Let me rid myself of insulting others and keep a respectful manner. Then when imparting guidelines and instructions to others, let me have compassion and a mind to help. So, we're not being fickle in our friendships, just fawning and fickle, giving people as praise to get what we want, or criticizing people behind the back to other people to get what we want. These kind of things don't help, and they cause suffering for ourselves and others. And obviously, as Bodhisattva, we need to be concerned not about ourselves but others. So how can we be doing deeds that cause others to suffer? And then when applying guideline instructions, so if we share the Dharma and we do it in a kind and caring way, it really helps improve people's connection. You can force the Dharma down someone's throat, but it's not going to help them. They'll have all these negative connotations to it, and they'll probably want to run away. Whereas if you share when people ask and you're kind and don't bring it up you can maybe bring it up a little bit, I think, but not too much that it's forcing. And then if it's just there, or you maybe talk, my teacher always says talk from a secular aspect to non-Buddhists. So he taught a 8-week program of Lojong, entirely secular. No mention whatsoever of the Dharma, using traditional terms, traditional texts. Just basic mind training, reduction of anger, increasing of kindness and happiness. And then that's a really good way for people that aren't religious, but they maybe want to be. They're working up to it. So obviously they've got to, in his case, being a monk teaching it, they've got to have some interest in attending teachings from a monk in a Buddhist centre. They've got to be open to that much, but they're maybe not open all the way to full-on Buddha Dharma. So there's a little bridge you can do. And he did say to me, in his opinion, that's where lay people are useful in the West. Because you can, you don't need to look like, you don't wear robes like a monk, you can just wear normal clothes. You can do it in a normal community centre or a library, totally unrelated to a Dharma centre, but you're bringing in Dharma concepts. And then if people want to learn more, you can lead them onto the Dharma. And I think that's a really useful way to do it. So, verse 23, let me never deny the Dharma, and setting my intention on whichever ones I fervently admire, let me make effort to split my day and night passing through the gateways of the 10 Dharma. So, when we're saying let me never deny the Dharma, we're talking about the refuge pledges. To praise the Buddha and not degenerate the Buddha, to respect all the teachings of the Buddha, not to step over holy texts, and to care for the Sangha and not disparage any of the Sangha at all. And then the 10 Dharma acts. So I've got copying texts, making offerings to the Triple Gem, giving to the poor, listening to scriptures, reading scriptures, meditating on the meaning of scriptures, explaining the Dharma, dedicating merit. And I have 2 that are missing from my notes. So, unfortunately, I'll have to find them later. This is something I've not seen referenced much. So you can kind of get the point here. We're talking about keeping refuge vows carefully and carrying out virtue. But yeah, it's good here. Atisha's mentioning very traditional aspects of virtue, reciting texts and copying texts out. And as well as the most important stuff like listening to the teachings and meditating on the teachings. Verse 24, let me dedicate to great peerless enlightenment as many constructive acts as I have mastered 3 times, and extend out to limited beings my positive force. So let me always offer the great prayer of the 7-limb practice. So we're talking about dedication. We need to dedicate with the 3 rounds of emptiness. Thinking the person doing the dedication prayer, the act of dedicating, and the aim to dedicate towards are all empty inherent existence. So they're the nature of cause and effect. So the aim we dedicate towards will come true. And that's incredibly powerful. And that's not just powerful because it means it continues. If you say you recite a mala of mani mantras and then say, the virtue arisen from this practice I dedicate until tomorrow, the merit expires tomorrow. But if you go, the virtue that's arisen from this practice I dedicate to the full enlightenment of all sentient beings, it lasts on and every day until all sentient beings attain enlightenment. And it's like a seed. My teacher says, it might not arise tomorrow. It creates a seed that's passed on for the next day and the next day until it reaches the cooperative conditions needed to ripen, and you have that karmic fruit to rise. And then dedicating merit is also really important because it protects our merit. A moment of anger destroys eons of merit. But if you dedicate with emptiness, it's protected. And there's a little bit of debate. Different teachers have disagreements about, is it protected? Is it not protected? How is it protected by emptiness? But Lama Zopa and a few other high lamas have kind of indicated that it's maybe doesn't protect all of the merit, but it stops it all from being destroyed. So it's really important we do dedicate to protect it. And then also, if we dedicate with bodhicitta, it's like putting a drop of water in an ocean. It's not adding a lot, but it's now in this much larger pool of merit. So, if you have a glass, a little shot glass that big of half full of water, and you had a drop in, it's not, and you now consider all of that your merit, it's not much. But if you had a bath full of water and had a little drop in, and think all of that's now your merit, you have a huge, much larger amount. You can always think you're just adding a little bit of merit and it grows drastically to this pool of merit of all the Buddhas of the 3 times. In the 7 limb prayer is being praised by Atisha. The 7 limb prayer is probably one of the most important practices. Really, all practice consists of the 7 limb prayer, for going for refuge, confessing negativities, claiming the good qualities of others, offering mandala, requesting the teachers to have a long life, requesting the teachers to remain and teach the Dharma, and then dedicating a merit. And this is probably the most important practice we can do, because we can accumulate merit and purify negativities in one single practice. So it's kind of vital to practice this. So in verse 25, doing like that, let me complete my 2 accumulations of positive force and deep awareness, and deplete my 2 obscurations as well, thus making my attainment of a human body meaningful. Let me attain a peerless enlightenment. So this translation is a bit of an odd translation. So saying, let me complete my 2 networks of positive force and deep awareness. More normal translation, we let complete my 2 accumulations of merit and wisdom. So, to attain enlightenment, we need both merit and wisdom. You can have an understanding of emptiness without enough merit. You can't have the realization of emptiness. And in the same way, you can have boundless amounts of merit, but if you don't understand emptiness and have no wisdom, it can't result in enlightenment. It'll have, happiness and fortunate rebirth, but never enlightenment. So we use these to remove our obscurations, the obscurations to knowledge and obscurations to omniscience. The 2 kind of afflictive obscurations. One is the acquired in this life, and the other is the innate that we're born with. We're born with a grasping to a self, and this is what perpetuates us in samsara. And then the acquired ones we learn through tenets. A good example would be you are born in a Christian country and you learn that God created the world. You're not born with that thought, but you are born with this inherent self feeling. But you learn this extra one, and this knowledge can be removed by tenets. If you attend a Buddhist teaching and you learn about cause and effect, and you think, well, that disproves God, created God, and then you kind of abandon that teaching. So they can be gained and lost by tenets, whereas the other ones can't. So verse 26, the gem of belief and fact, the gem of self-discipline, gem of generosity, the gem of listening, the gem of care for how my actions reflect on others and of moral self-dignity, and the gem of discriminating awareness makes 7. So these are kind of the 7 gems of Dharma practice that Atisha talks about a lot. Belief in fact is, faith and conviction of the Buddha's teachings, believing they do lead us to enlightenment. The generosity, it's quite, simple. It's the practice of generosity that provides us with wealth and beneficial conditions. Moral self-dignity is this feeling of shame about breaking your vows. And the gem of discriminating awareness is to do with the wisdom. And these gems, what we practice to generate merit and progress along the path. So this links to verse 27, where we say, these sacred gems, 7 gems that will never deplete, they must not be mentioned to quasi-humans. So quasi-humans are people that degenerate the Dharma. And it's not just people that don't have total faith because they're new and don't understand, but people that actively go out their way to harm the Dharma. It's just how monks are to teach people who don't request it. Really, we shouldn't share with those who aren't interested and force it down the throat because they'll have negative views of the Dharma. So these, the 7 gems are things we need to practice, but not maybe force on others. Emptiness is a big one. We can't. If someone's not ready, it'll cause more suffering to learn about. And then finally, verse 28, when in the midst of many, let me keep check on my speech. When remaining alone, let me keep check on my mind. And this verse is probably the most important Dharma teaching I've received. If you're with others, watch your speech. Don't criticize, don't harm. When you're with others, that's the main way you accumulate non-virtue, by speaking badly and criticizing people and so on. Whereas when you're alone, you don't really speak. You're on your own. Well, I don't know, most people speak to themselves a bit, but it's not quite the same. The main thing is your mind having these negative thoughts that arise and cause suffering. So we need to train both outwards and inwards. And generally, when we're with others, it's easy to train in the outwards. And when we're alone, it's a bit easy to train with the inwards. Which is kind of why we have to alternate between retreat and living in the world. If you're in retreat all the time, you might have checked your own mind really well, but then you meet someone and you're just useless. There's a story, I think it was Miller April, who met the meditator in the cave. And he said, oh, what are you meditating on? This meditator very proudly went, oh, I'm meditating on patience. And Miller April turned around and said, well, why don't you eat shit? And the meditator was like, how dare you say that to me? I'm a great meditator on patience. And Miller was like, well, you're not. You might think you have, but you haven't encountered a person for that long. You actually have no patience. So I think that's really important, that we do train our mind in retreat, but go out and check, have we actually made a difference? And we're not just on our own. We go out and engage, and we do the Bodhisattva actions, the 6 perfections, and so on. Yeah, so that concludes the Bodhisattva Garland of Jewels by Atisha. So we'll just quickly dedicate before the Zoom meeting ends itself. And for this, we shall just use these brief prayers put together for practice. Daki shine saphe yawadi tendan lowa kundan pedang kipa jetso losan rapai tempe ningpo rindu seze sho dangwi rowi kowi sinkam so pendang dewa malu yongwe ni chenwe zingwang tenzing yaso yi shape site badu tengyu chi Nation Samba Che Make Panam Keyuchi Kepa Nyamba Mepa Yang Gong Ye Gong Du Pelwa Sho Dangchu Sencho Rinpoche Make Panam Keyuchi Kepa Nyamba Mepa Yang Gong Ye Gong Du Pelwa Sho Tongyi Tawa Rinpoche Make Panam Keyuchi Kepa Nyamba Mepa Yang Gong Ye Gong Du Pelwa Sho. As long as space remains, as long as my greatest remain, until they may too remain, spell the suffering of my greatest. And then just thinking of what we discussed, really important to seal this with emptiness. So think how the person making the dedication, the act of dedicating, and the aim, and the merit we dedicate, and the aim we dedicate full enlightenment for ultimately beings of empty and inherent existence, something in the nature of cause and effect. Okay, thank you very much.